Hello and welcome to Organic Edible Garden. The moon's now coming to the last quarter, which is a great time to do maintenance around the garden. And at this time of year, it's getting hotter and we're going to look at different types of mulches we can use. We're also going to look at some of the weeds that grow like crazy in this sort of weather and how we can use some of those weeds to make a liquid fertilizer to feed our garden during the summer months. There's a whole array of mulches we can use in our garden over the summer months. There's the organic and inorganic types. The inorganics are things like your black plastic and your stones which won't break down. But as an organic gardener, I like the organic types that will break down and actually feed the soil over time. There's things like your good old compost, full of carbon matter and it holds the moisture in the soil. Things like well composted chook poo, which has got all the fibres of the wood in there and will also do the same job. I've got some straw here. Now this is oat straw, but you can use any type of straw like lucerne or wheat or of those guys, but I try to avoid hay because it's often got a lot of grass seeds in it. I've also got some of this wool, and this is pelletized wool, and what it does, it expands and it actually keeps the moisture in the soil and the slugs off. There's the good old coffee grounds, which is a resource that's so often thrown away. Now this is quite acidic, so it's really good around things like tomatoes, eggplants and peppers, and things that like those acidic conditions. Not only do the coffee grounds smell great, but they're a good form of carbon in the soil. But if you leave them like this, often they can bake and start repelling water. So what I do is I just slowly mulch it into the soil and it seems to do it a lot better. And it's got the benefit that slugs and snails hate it. And today I'm also going to use some of this coconut fibre mat. It's held together by a natural latex and will last about 2-3 years, so I can reuse it again a couple times. These coconut fibre mats are actually designed for fruit trees when you start them off, but they work just as well around things like your zucchinis or your rhubarb. If you just put it around the plant, and then you can just close it off. What I'm doing is trying to put a few weed mat pins in there just to keep it down. This will keep the moisture in but still let the rain go through and feed the plants. So not only is it good for that reason, but it also keeps the leaves off the soil. And in a humid climate like ours, it's always going to be a bonus. You can also use things like newspaper and cardboard to do the same thing. The good part about the coconut fibre matting is it also stops snails and slugs walking across it. It's just too rough. It also keeps the soil cool in summertime. It helps keep the earthworms close to the surface and protects the bacteria and fungi in the soil. The weeds have been going crazy with this weather and it's time to start pulling some of them out. I'm especially concentrating on the onions because they hate to compete with the weeds. This is the bed that we put on as a short turnaround root crop, and things like the fennel and the beetroot, the daikon and the turnips are just about all ready to eat. I planted a lot of these guys really close together, but because I like the baby vegetables, it's easy for me still to take every second one out so the others can size up. And then I use things like the daikons and turnip in my salads tonight. Now instead of putting these weeds straight into the compost, I'm going to make a liquid feed out of them. This will make them more readily available to the plants during summer when they really need it. But I'll put gloves on first because some of them are quite prickly. There's a whole lot of varieties of weeds that you can use for making your liquid compost. There's things like your thistles, like your puha or your ox tongue here. The good old cleaver is really high in silica and they're great to add to it as well. Then there's things like your chickweed over here, a good form of nitrogen in it. But there are some weeds I don't like to add to my liquid feed, and they're things of the nightshade family. There's things like shoe fly, the deadly nightshade and the black nightshade or any of the tomato family, we just don't ever put that in liquid feed. Also some of this creeping buttercup, we don't put that in either. That goes straight into the compost bin. And finally some comfrey. This is one of the most beneficial plants in the garden and gives our liquid fertilizer a potassium boost. That's really good for all of our fruiting plants like our tomatoes, eggplants and peppers. And if you don't have any of these other weeds in the garden, even grass clippings like this, they're good in a liquid feed like that. They'll add a form of nitrogen to it. Now before we go and add our weeds to the bucket, I want to crush down these cells so it breaks down quicker. And I just do that by standing on it. Now all we have to do is add it to a bucket and fill it full of water. If you're lucky enough to live near a beach, this is the time you add your seaweed as well. Now all we have to do now is cover it up. You can use a lid like this, but because it's fermenting, never put it on tight because it can release gases. Another option is using a towel like this over the top. It'll keep the bugs and the other stuff out, but it still breathes. After about 2 weeks, this would have broken down, and you can start using it. You want to dilute it with water to the colour of weak tea. And remember, when you're putting any liquid fertiliser onto a garden bed, it's always best to water the garden bed first and then put the fertiliser on, and this prevents burning the roots. Now at this time of year when the plants are growing really strong and fast, it's often good to give them some liquid feed. In this case, I'm just mixing a bit of the seaweed and fish into a bucket, and I'm going to pour it over the garlic. This can be done on any plants, especially your heavy fruiting plants like your zucchinis and your tomatoes.